The ZDX is the first electric Acura, and this is the Type S version, the faster, more exciting version. And in this video, I'm going to cover the exterior, the interior, take it for a drive and see what it's like out on the road, as well as talking about the kind of range you can expect and also the pricing and how it compares to the competition. So as far as the ZDX Type S, well, of course, the big elephant in the room is that it is based on GM's Ultium platform. Acura didn't want to sit on the sidelines while everyone else was coming out with EVs. They wanted to have something quick, and so this was this partnership that they did with GM that also produced the Honda Prologue. But yes, this is based on the same Ultium platform as the Blazer EV, and more specifically here, the Cadillac Lyriq, sharing the same battery pack and a couple other little things. But as far as the exterior styling, Acura did a really good job of making this look completely different than the GM siblings that have the same underpinnings. So you have up front there the characteristic dual eye LED headlights here. You can see on other Acuras, you see the same kind of Acura grille, although on this one it's of course blocked off being an EV and just has the light outline there to define that grille. And I think it's a pretty nice look up front there for sure. I don't think it's the best Acura in the lineup from a styling standpoint, but I think it certainly does look really nice. Coming down to the sides here, you have these 22-inch wheels that really make a statement, especially with these 6-piston calipers you have here hiding behind those wheels to give you that extra stopping power like you're expecting from a Type S version. I also really like the way they did the two-tone thing here with the black roof and the floating D-pillar area you have there. It's a really unique look, I'd say. You know, a lot of people do floating rear pillars these days, but to me, this one kind of stands out a little more, being a little more floaty than some of the others. And then out back, you have some taillights that are, pretty similar to other Acuras, and, again, gives you that familiar styling language that you're used to from Acura here. And, a nice back end for sure. And I think that overall, it's a pretty nice looking vehicle. It certainly is a lot bolder than the Honda Prologue, which kind of did a more subdued approach. I think this is very exciting and very in your face and looks really good, especially here in this double apex blue pearl color. Unfortunately, on the interior of the ZDX, it's a lot more GM than the outside. So they did differentiate it a decent bit. You'll see like the dashboard and all that is a little bit more unique. And there are some signature Acura things like the metal trim up here on the tops of the doors. But a lot of it is GM parts bin stuff and not for the better. I mean, the biggest grievance to me are these window switches, which are right out of any other cheap like lower end Chevy product. Honestly, like even the Lyriq and stuff have nicer switches. So I'm not sure why they couldn't use window switches that were nicer, but Honda's own Civic has nicer window switches than we have in this ZDX, which is $76,450 for this one as tested. And I mean, these start at like $74.5, but I mean, this price point and you have nicer window switches in a Honda Civic, like that doesn't fly. Like something should have been done. Put a little metal cap on them, something. If they had to stick to GM parts bin stuff, there's other nicer GM parts bin parts to use. So that kind of stuff is just unacceptable to me. And yeah, we'll get into the other parts of the interior here as we go through it. But first off, sitting down in these seats, the seats are a high point to me. They are nice and soft, notably softer than the Prologue actually, and they're not quite as soft as the Cadillac Lyriq seats, but they are very nice and do have all the usual adjustments here and do have this adjustable bolstering. They are heated and cooled seats, which is great, and I love the perforations on them and the Type S logo, and they do have the same kind of pattern for the stitching and all that like we see on other Acura products. So these feel actually a lot more Acura-like to me than the Prologue seats. But anyway, moving on to the steering wheel here, you have a nice beefy wheel here, but it's the same steering wheel as you get in the Blazer, and it's still fine though. You have the Type S logo here and the gray on the bottom. I mean, there's some subtle differences, but the buttons are all the same here. And you even have, of course, this one has Super Cruise here, although Acura calls it hands-free cruise. But you have that here, with the indicator on the steering wheel. So I mean, a lot of GM stuff here, but it's a great wheel. So to me, that's not anything to complain about. Totally fine there. But if you are used to Acuras, you have a lot of other adjustments you're going to have to make. Like you see, you have your windshield wipers here on the left-hand side with a little toggle instead of being on the right like it is in every other Honda and Acura. On the right here, you have a column-mounted shifter, also something that Acura buyers are not going to be familiar with. It's easy to use though, and I think it's really great to have the shifter on the column. but just going to be, again, a major switch here for Acura loyalists. But moving on to the gauges here, you have an 11-inch gauge cluster, and this is very similar to what you see in all of the GM EVs as well, where, you know, it has a center power meter thing, and you have stuff on the right and on the left there, and you have various views. So you can have like a map view. It's all the same stuff, just reskinned here for the Acura with their unique fonts. My big gripe with these gauges, and again, the GM and the Honda Prologue as well have the same thing, where for some reason, the only way you can see the percentage of the battery that you have left is if you power off the vehicle. Otherwise, whenever it's on, it only shows you the amount of range that it's estimating you have left, and you have a little like fuel gauge style bar there that gives you a rough approximation of exactly, you know, what percentage you have. But I'd like to see that extra precision, especially from a precision engineered vehicle like an Acura, like they like to say. You know, it's just one thing that irks me. With an EV, you want to see the exact percentage of your battery. Most other EVs do that, and this just doesn't. So that's the only thing. But otherwise, totally fine gauges. Coming over to the middle of the dashboard here, you have one of the first Acura touchscreens, although the MDX is the first touchscreen I believe that Acura has rolled out as well, that is an Acura produced touchscreen. This is still some GM Partsman stuff. This is a component that's shared with the Prologue. This whole center stack is shared with the Prologue, by the way, as well. And this is also a downgrade compared to, you know, the Lyriq has like a 33-inch screen with the two screens combined in a beautiful curved enclosure. And, you know, you even look at the Blazer, has a 17.7-inch screen, and yet this more expensive Acura has a smaller 11.3-inch display instead. You know, I'm not sure why. Again, I don't know all the details of what they were able to take from GM and what they weren't. But to me, this just kind of feels like a downgrade compared to the GM products. And like Acura got the short end of the stick here a little bit. Now, the one huge good thing, though, about this screen is the fact that it does have wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto. Honda and Acura somehow were able to, you know, elect to have that integration. GM, with all of their EVs going forward, aside from the Lyriq, which is grandfathered in, don't have Apple CarPlay or Android Auto whatsoever. So this has that. And if you are someone who loves the GM Ultium vehicles, but you really want that smartphone integration, which I think a lot of people really do, then this is the way to go. Go for the Honda or the Acura here. You get that smartphone integration and all the great perks of the GM Ultium vehicles. And so it's really cool they're able to have that as a really big differentiator. But otherwise, you know, it does have Google built in. So it has Google Assistant. It has Google Maps that runs natively. You also have the Google Play Store. So you can download apps and have those run natively if you'd like. Although, again, since you have the smartphone mirroring, you know, there's not really any point, I don't think, unless you like having it baked in for whatever reason. But, you know, everything else, you know, tuning radio stations, all that works nice and easily. And overall, you know, really good screen. The only other little thing I will say is that this also unfortunately got the other weird quirk from a lot of these new GM vehicles, where they are putting the headlight controls in the screen. So that means that if you want to turn on your headlights manually, it's multiple submenus you got to go into in order. It's like 3 or 4 taps to get into actually changing your headlights, which I think is, you know, still something you want to do if you're like in a construction zone in the middle of the day where they say headlights are required by law. You have to go in there and do that because auto headlights aren't going to turn on for that kind of a situation. So I don't love that. And also it's strange that you have your drive modes that come up here on the screen, and you know, you can adjust like the individual mode and all that in there, but the drive mode selector itself is down here, way buried down by your left knee. And it's also strange because whenever you have your drive mode selected, it doesn't show it in the gauge cluster. The gauge cluster doesn't change at all, and it doesn't even tell you that it's in that mode. And so you can honestly forget completely what mode you're in if, you know, you set it a while ago and, you know, you've completely forgotten, unless you pay attention to the fact that, oh, my steering's heavier or whatever. But another strange kind of thing that Acura doesn't make these mistakes in their own vehicles. So why, you know, these things happened here with this partnership, it just, to me, feels a little, you know, underwhelming. And I'm not sure, you know, again, the behind the scenes that went into this vehicle, but, you know, just some head scratching choices here. Another head scratching choice is the fact that we have the Blazer's climate controls, and this is shared again with the Prologue as well. But again, the Cadillac Lyriq has, you know, really impressive stuff. I wish they would have been able to take more from the Lyriq, honestly, because that has a really cool, you know, setup for all these types of things. And this, I mean, it's fine. You know, you have these little knobs that, you know, do your climate controls, and, you know, it's nice to have physical buttons too, because a lot of other, you know, companies are putting all that stuff in the screen. So I do have to give them credit for retaining physical buttons. That is a win. So I'm not going to complain too much here. But, you know, it's just, this is stuff that, again, doesn't feel like it's worthy of a $76,000 vehicle to me. but you know, I will move on. It is what it is. Now, as far as the rest of this interior, it is really good as far as cargo space and interior storage goes. So in the doors here, you have a decent sized pocket with a bottle holder there. In the middle here, though, you will see, first off, in the bottom, you have this giant pass-through area that you can fit some good extra stuff. But right up top, this is also massive. You could fit like a small tablet right on top of here or something like that. You also see 2 USB-C jacks and another power outlet as well. And you also have some cup holders here. And you have a wireless charging pad here that is a vertical one. That's a GM thing. I think it actually works better than the lay flat ones that Acura typically does. So I think that's actually an improvement, except the GM vehicles have little rubber nubs to hold your phone in place better. And this doesn't have that. I don't know why they got rid of that part in particular, but I mean, it still should be, again, a pretty good wireless charging pad. And so nice you have that. You also have the center armrest that's got some nice padding to it. You open that up, you'll see a very deep cubby there. A really nice amount of space in there. One other thing the ZDX introduces is this is the first Acura to have a Bang & Olufsen stereo, and that is something that's a difference from the GM vehicles, which use Bose stereos for their upgrade. Having the Bang & Olufsen is really nice, and it's really cool, you know, speaker designs here. And it's really cool you have speakers in the ceiling as well, which is something we've seen in other Acuras, so that, to me, makes it feel a little more Acura-like having that. And, you know, that is one nice differentiator of this over those GM vehicles. And then, moving on to the back seat in the ZDX, it is a lot of space here. So I'm 5'9", me sitting behind myself. I easily have about 4 or 5 inches of legroom to spare. Really feels spacious and comfortable back there. And here in the Type S version in particular, you have the Tri-Zone climate. It's only in the Type S, but that gives you, of course, their own climate controls back there. They have heated rear seats. It's just another exclusive thing here to the Type S. And you also see a fold-down center armrest, the 2 cup holders built into it, and pockets in those doors as well. And they have a great view to look out of here with this double pane moonroof. Cargo space here in the ZDX is also pretty good. Now, these GM Ultium vehicles, they don't do the best job with space utilization, so it's not quite as large, at least by the numbers, compared to some other typical, you know, vehicles that are this size, you know. So, I mean, it's a fairly long space, fairly wide, but when you lift up the floor, other GM vehicles have a deep well there, but it's for some reason blocked off here in the ZDX. I'm not sure why. So you don't really have much space under the floor there, so you just have whatever you have there on the top. There is no front trunk in this either. That's just dedicated to all those motors and all that. So not a ton of space, honestly. And I'd say as far as cargo space goes, even like an Acura RDX, to me, feels like it has more space than this does, actually. But, you know, I mean, it's still an SUV. It still has a decent amount of space, so it shouldn't be too big of a deal. But the only other thing that I can complain about in the back there is you will see there's a gap. That rear seat is reclined back as far as it will go. And there still is like a gap there, and you can see like the exposed metal there for where the latch is. And that just seems a little unrefined. Again, we're talking about a vehicle that's $76,000, and you're going to, you know, have things that just don't seem super polished. Feels like it's, I don't know, again, I'm sure they had the restraints they had with the GM parts bin stuff that they can only do so much, but, you know, these are just some strange things that, again, just are head scratchers. But let's start it up and go for a drive. The last complaint I will say about this whole partnership thing here is the key fob. So this is a Chevy key fob, and I mean, if you look, it's like the plastic doesn't match. We have Chevy's normal plastic here. We do have, you know, the little metal here on the side, but that's also something you see on the Chevy. But if you look at the Acura logo, that has a glossy black background, and this is just a little cutout, and then this is a different, it doesn't match. Like, you know, I don't know. Again, I'm sure they can only do what they could do. It just, this is really interesting, the badge engineering goes on here. But, you know, so you have some buttons there, but it's just, it's funny, you know, we haven't seen partnerships like this very often in recent memory. And so seeing, you know, some of these types of compromises that have to get made for one reason or another, it's very, very interesting. But anyway, it is, of course, keyless access, keyless entry, and push button start. So you just leave the key in your pocket, hit the power button here, and it turns right on, complete with the GM chimes. You know, another thing that doesn't feel like you're in an Acura whenever you have all the same chimes as a GM vehicle. I wish they could have changed that too. Alright, so setting off here in the ZDX Type S. So the first thing you notice about, you have really good visibility. You know, they have a little bit of a lower cowl, I think, than most of the GM vehicles, which is nice because you can see forward very well. Although this dash pad does come up a little bit higher, than I would like, but you know, it's not too bad. You have nice thin A-pillars, mirrors off onto the doors, and a good view out of the back, because on the Type S only do you get the camera rear view mirror, which you can get in other Chevys and stuff very easily, but for some reason in this it's only in the Type S, but that gives you a really good view. But even if you don't have that on regular ZDX, you still have a pretty good view out of the back there. And other things here to note, so brakes feel nice and natural and normal to me, and of course every EV's got really good throttle response, but this is really nice, and it's kind of dulled. It's not razor sharp response, which I actually appreciate, so you can be nice and gradual and smooth with your accelerations if you'd like. And you know, I also like on this road that we're on right now, a little bit of a rougher road, but it's still pretty quiet in here. These roads generate a lot of road noise typically in the other vehicles I've been driving on them recently, and this is, you know, totally fine, pretty good. It's also a nice smooth ride, even on these 22-inch wheels. You know, we have this adaptive air suspension, which I believe is partially thanks to Cadillac. I think they have that as well in the Lyriq, but it's you know, really a good system. It does a great job here of soaking up the bumps here. But we are going to, I thought I was going to run into that vehicle even though it was parked on the side of the road. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and put it up into the sport mode. We have a little bit of a windy road, not too long, but I'm just gonna do a little bit of sporty driving here. That does firm up the dampers, I believe, as air suspension, and we'll just see how it handles these roads. They are a little bit wet, and it's a pretty narrow road, so I can't push it too much here, but we're gonna just see how it does nonetheless. The big thing here you're gonna feel, especially on a little tight road like this, is the weight. These weigh almost 6,000 pounds thanks to the giant 102 kilowatt hour battery, but yeah, it's like 5,983 pounds, I believe, for these, so pretty heavy. And we got Jason Fensky on the side of the road there. But anyway, you know, so it's doing really good though, soaking up these bumps and feeling very, you know, confident and capable. And yeah, I mean, even though you have that weight, I mean, EVs, you know, the great thing about them is that nice low center of gravity, so you're able to, you know, do a really good job of, you know, going around a corner no problem, and accelerating up here puts the paradigm pretty well with this all-wheel drive system, which is the only way the Type S comes, of course, is with all-wheel drive, like any other Type S. You can get rear-wheel drive in the regular ZDX. Again, another carryover from the GM vehicles. The first rear-wheel drive Acura, I believe. But here we got all-wheel drive and good amount of punch. We'll do a little acceleration here in a second. But, you know, handled that very well, I'd say. And, yeah, just feels pretty good for what it is. You know, and you do feel like you're sitting pretty low in this. It is SUV-like, but it's, I'd say, a lower feeling SUV for sure. It feels pretty good. But let's do an acceleration here and see how this dual motor setup does. And here we go. Got a sound there? Makes a little sound that it generates. It's a good amount of power. It is pretty punchy. So even though, I mean, it's a lot of weight, but it's 499 horsepower. They couldn't quite get to 500. I don't know why. Then 544 pound-feet of torque. It'll do a 4.3 second 0 to 60 time and a 12.7 second quarter mile. And I mean, it's a lot of punch, especially, you know, it's funny, even in sport mode here though, you know, you can go almost a quarter throttle before it really starts to register that you want to, you know, accelerate, and then it really does ramp up very nicely and aggressively. Now we'll do another acceleration with the wheel turn a little bit. Yeah, it does a really good job putting the power down here with this all-wheel drive system. You also have 275 wide tires all around on this, so good meaty tires that give you a good amount of grip, which you're going to want, again, with this much power, to put that power to the ground effectively. And it feels really good. And whenever you want to slow down this power, you have these 6-piston Brembo front calipers here on 15.4-inch rotors, I believe. So nice big brakes here, of course, something that's, again, almost 6,000 pounds, accelerating as quickly as this does. Yeah, that's what you're going to want. So it's really nice that you have some good brakes here. Now, as far as all the battery info here for the ZDX Type S, so it runs a 102 kilowatt hour battery pack. It'll do about 278 miles of range as the claimed estimate here from Acura and the EPA for this vehicle, and it'll recharge at speeds of 190 kilowatts, which is pretty impressive. But this pack, again, since it's such a large battery pack, it still ends up only, according to Acura, resulting in a 20% to 80% charge in about 42 minutes. So strangely, it's a little slow because, I mean, 190 kilowatts is pretty good. So I guess the curve must just drop off and that peak rate doesn't hold for very long. But, you know, a good charge rate, though, honestly, that is one advantage over like the Prologue, for example, is you do have faster charging without only doing 150 with its smaller 85 kilowatt hour battery. So you get the bigger battery here in the Acura and those faster charge speeds. And now I'm back in normal mode, but just doing a little highway merge here. It really pulls nice and strong in these higher speeds as well. And yeah, I mean, this much power, you're not going to run out of steam really ever. But it's just, you know, even at some higher speeds here, doing a really good job. Now, this highway does have a lot of rough parts, so it's generating a lot of road noise, but almost every highway in America is not going to be this rough. So, you know, don't be too discouraged if you hear a lot of road noise here on camera. But now that we're out on the highway, I'm going to enable the hands-free cruise, and we're going to see how that does here. So I'm going to set the settings here for it, and we just let it do its thing because the green light is on, so I can now do hands-free driving. And Super Cruise is what it is, so I'm just going to call it that. It is my favorite hands-free system. There's not too many hands-free systems that are, you know, truly actually hands-free here, but this is one of them, and it gives me a lot of confidence every time I'm in a vehicle with this. We will see if the Acura is any different, but I'm not expecting it to be, because again, it's all GM hardware. Shouldn't have any changes here compared to any other GM product. But yeah, it's doing a really good job here, and it also does the auto lane changes, which is really cool. So this is the newest version of Super Cruise, not a lower version, and it executes lane changes perfectly. And that means with this new version, it also intelligently positions you in the lane. So when it sees a large truck or something, it can kind of come over to the other side of the lane to give you a little bit of extra space and kind of do the natural positioning that most drivers do out on the highway. So like we have this large highway here, and it even wants to get over one more for some reason. So that's interesting. I don't know why it wants to do that, but maybe it wants to give me some extra space here for that driver in the truck there, because now, okay, I was about to go over and then it did it for me. So it's very intelligent with the way that it makes the decisions it makes, and it does a really good job. And I think it sensed also there's a car coming up behind me there, and it wanted to be considerate and let them over here. And yeah, I really love this, and this is something you can't get in the Honda Prologue, by the way. It's only in the Acura and only in the Type S version here, I believe, as well. So, this is really fantastic. So if you are, just shopping the ZDX versus another electric luxury crossover, even from, a Japanese brand like you have the Lexus RZ or, any of the others out there from Genesis, things like that, none of those other ones do the hands-free thing. And so this is it. It's this and the GM stuff. And if you do a lot of highway driving in your EV, I mean, Super Cruise is definitely the way to go. And yeah, I absolutely love this system. It's really, really good. As far as the other safety tech goes here in the ZDX Type S, it of course has everything possible, basically. It has blind spot monitoring as standard. Everything is standard here. Rear cross traffic alert, automatic reversing braking, the lane keeping assist, all the stuff. They have your bases covered. Again, it's a $76,000 Acura, and that is one area where at least everything here is included, and so it's great. You have all that stuff. The 360 camera is really good, and it gives you a great view there for maneuvering in tight spaces. The last thing to talk about is pricing and how it compares to its competitors. So, as tested, the exact price is $75,450, and aside from $600 for the paint and an option for performance wheels and tires, there's really nothing else to add on. And that price is very competitive if you stick strictly to the larger sporty electric crossovers. An Audi SQ8 e-tron starts at $90,000, a comparable Polestar 3 Performance is $80,000, and even the regular all-wheel drive Lyriq I recently reviewed was $77,000 with almost 100 less pound-feet of torque. But personally, the far nicer interior and polish of the Cadillac while still having 500 horsepower would be good enough for me, so I'd still rather just have that over this. I also think the Blazer SS EV is a good competitor when that finally goes on sale in 2025 with a starting price of just $62,000, with that actually giving you a bigger screen and otherwise basically the same interior and size, maybe a little bit less luxury than the Acura, but pretty close. Plus you get nearly 600 horsepower in that Blazer SS EV for less money. So, I mean, you do lose Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with that one though, so that's the one downside, but if that's not a deal breaker, I think that is another one to consider. If you're a little flexible on size, the Genesis GV60 Performance is really impressive, as is my all-time favorite EV so far, the Hyundai Ioniq 5N. If you're really serious about about a fun electric crossover, and both of those are less expensive as well. And if you're just looking for a straight line speed and aren't turned off by Tesla these days, the Model Y Performance is the cheapest of the bunch by a good margin, and even boasts a significantly faster 0 to 60 time than the Acura. But yes, that's pretty much all my thoughts here on the ZDX Type S. I think that overall, you know, if the interior part sharing stuff doesn't bother you, and if this, you know, is priced right, if you get a discount or there's a good lease deal or whatever, I think this can make a lot of sense as like the sportier luxury GM Ultium vehicle that isn't available yet. Cadillac doesn't have a V version of the Lyriq. You know, the Blazer, you know, isn't quite as luxurious as this in my opinion. So I think, you know, this kind of occupies a unique space here in a niche that I think does make sense if the price is right and you're, again, flexible on how much Acura is in your Acura. If, you know, again, you're not hung up on those things, I think the ZDX is actually a really nice driving, great fun performance vehicle that just, you know, I think needs a little bit of an interior improvement, but other than that, it's really good. So anyway, that's all of my thoughts here on the ZDX Type S. Let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Huge thanks to Acura for bringing this vehicle to the Automotive Video Association to give me the opportunity to review it for you guys today. Yeah, thank you all very much for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Take care.